So there's been a lot to unpack this past weekend with Deadpool and Wolverine and the Comic-Con announcements, including Robert Downey Jr. returning as Dr. Doom. We'll save that for a later discussion, but we're here to talk about Deadpool and Wolverine, directed by Sean Levy, starring the two men of the hour, Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman, and certain people. That's all I'm going to tell you. It's Deadpool several years after the events of Deadpool 2, and certain things involving the Time Variance Authority, or the TVA from the Loki series, require his attention. And as you'd expect from Deadpool, the fourth wall breaking, the gratuitous humor, the violence, the blood, and the gore, all that is in there more or less as it was the first two times around, and we have our movie. For this movie's sake, I'm actually going to do two videos, a spoiler-free video and a spoiler-filled video, because there is a lot to digest from this one. And I want to try to get my initial thoughts out to you guys as quickly as I could. Heck, I might even go back and rewatch it to refresh my memory. And also, some people still haven't seen it by now, so I'm not going to go into too much detail. But right off the bat, this movie is definitely worth your time. A lot was riding on this one. We had Ryan Reynolds coming back, Hugh Jackman was returning as a variant of Wolverine this time around, and it was starting to be seen and hyped up as the way to pivot Marvel back in the right direction. Regardless of how you feel about the MCU post-Endgame, I like some of the movies more than the others, but I think we can all agree that it's been in somewhat of a slump lately, and they need some kind of an adrenaline boost to get things back on track. Knowing the track record of Ryan Reynolds and Deadpool, I was fairly confident that this was going to be the one to do so. This, along with No Way Home, Loki, and the What If series, is one of the best examples on how to properly use the multiverse. No spoilers, but there's some appearances from people that I kind of knew going in, but I didn't remember initially when they announced it. And then some other people show up that I thought, you're kidding me. No way. Not only does it have the fourth wall breaking from Deadpool along with the gratuitous humor that he's known for, it also has the meta commentary on talking about how things were going down between the studios and the obvious nods and winks towards the cameras that we've seen also in the trailers where he talks about how the R rating is different for the studio. In other movies that would normally be seen as a problem, but Reynolds along with Deadpool are among the few people that can actually get away with it. And like with the previous two times, Ryan Reynolds just continues to showcase that he is the best actor to play this character. His love and passion for the source material still oozes through every single second he's on screen, and it never once comes off as insufferable in the wrong ways. I'm still not the biggest fan of his style of humor, but if you're someone who is a Deadpool fan, this is definitely it for you and then some. And his interactions with Hugh Jackman's Wolverine makes for a great buddy cop film. Or a road trip movie, actually, as I've heard some other people mention that this is very similar to Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. And with Hugh Jackman's return, I was really curious to see what they would do, because they said from the get-go in the announcement video last year they were going to honor what happened with Logan, which I thought was a very bittersweet and beautiful send-off for that character. They managed to hold up their end of the bargain on that front. It's more or less what we've seen in all the previous times that he's portrayed the character, but this is a very different type of regret that Logan is feeling. If you've seen the trailers, they let you know that he's caused some destructive events to happen, and again, I'm trying to be really careful to not give too much away. I did kind of wish that they would have delved a little bit deeper on that area, but ultimately I was fine with what they did. And once again, Hugh Jackman continues to prove that he is one hell of a team player. There's no other actor in the comic book movie genre that has portrayed the same character, more or less, for as consistently as he's been for 24 years. And he's even won a Guinness World Record for that reason alone. I'd also be mad at myself if I didn't mention the obvious fact that he's wearing the famous yellow costume from the comics. When that image was revealed last year with him walking next to Deadpool in the yellow costume, I immediately thought he finally got the yellow spandex.
You actually go outside in these things? What would you prefer? Yellow spandex?
Thanks to that, I can't watch that moment from X-Men the same way anymore. As for the villainous characters in the Deadpool movies, they haven't really been huge standouts for me, except for maybe Cable in Deadpool 2. In this one, we have Cassandra Nova and Paradox. Paradox is a Time Variance Authority agent, while Cassandra Nova is basically the female version of Charles Xavier, albeit a really bad one. And the way that they play into the logistics of their characterizations, I found myself kind of leaning towards Cassandra Nova a little bit more because I found her to be the most engaging of the two. Mr. Paradox gets the job done, but I found Cassandra Nova to be more of a threat, to be honest with you. For now, I'll keep my thoughts on them to a minimum because I'll be veering into the spoiler territory, but I think they actually might be the most fun villains in a Deadpool movie out of all three of them. And when it comes to the action, it's actually, I would say, maybe a little more crazier in some ways than the previous two were, although I did miss somewhat of the high energy ferocity that Deadpool 2 brought to the table, given that it was directed by one of the directors of the John Wick series. Sean Levy, if I'm pronouncing that right, I think he directs the action and these certain scenes very competently. He's not someone who has a really strong or distinct aesthetic like some directors do, but I don't really have that much need or desire to see that in every single director that I see a movie from. Marvel has been criticized for basically putting someone in the director's chair to just steer the wheel. Whether or not you like that, that's down to personal preference. I think in a way it's refreshing to see a different kind of style rather than just repeating what we saw the first two times around. We had Tim Miller with the first one, David Light or Leitch with the second one. I still don't know how to pronounce that correctly. So naturally, I think to keep it consistent in that respect, you had to bring in somebody else to the table. Probably the best action sequence besides the big fights between Deadpool and Wolverine, which I know fans were just salivating over, is the opening credits scene when he fights the TVA in the snowy forest. The incorporation of a certain song from a boy band in the late 90s. Like with the yellow spandex thing, I can't listen to that song the same way anymore. That being said, there are a couple of things that I think they could have tweaked and make this movie a little bit better. I think more focus could have been given on Wade Wilson's overall arc. Not to be too specific, once again, he wants to feel like he matters, and he doesn't feel like he does. Him hanging up the costume of Deadpool has led him to cause a certain rift between him and certain people that he's close with, and I think there is some decent setup and payoff that's given. It does kind of get lost in the shuffle when he and Wolverine go on this big road multiversal crossroad trip. And I think if you had an extra moment or maybe one scene for Wade Wilson to kind of just sit there in his own self-deprecating humorous type of way, give us a glimpse of what's going on inside of his head. We do get something like that, but I think a little more depth would have sufficed. Nevertheless, I was definitely more than satisfied with Deadpool and Wolverine. Even with all of the small problems or things that I think they could have improved on, it delivers in so many spades all the other stuff that fans have been wanting to see for years. And if you thought No Way Home, Doctor Strange 2, and Loki went crazy with the multiversal stuff, wait until you see this. You don't need me to tell you to go see it if you haven't already, but in case you haven't, just do yourself a favor and buy your ticket and go to the theater. What are you doing with yourself if you're not? Those are my spoiler-free thoughts on Deadpool and Wolverine. Thank you guys so much for watching. Comment below and tell me what your thoughts are on this movie, and be sensitive about specific plot details until we get to the spoiler video. But either way, just let me know down below, and as always, see you in the next one.